Take one of these pry tools, go ahead and wedge it between there, and just try to work your way around it. Just like so. Pop it right off. And with these, you'll notice there's two little indentations on one side, and you look on the fourth, those indentations are on the bottom. I feel like you're looking facing towards the front of the vehicle, therefore like facing down, which is transition like this. But looking at the fork itself, it doesn't look like it really matters which way it goes on, because it has the dimples on both sides. Now with these, they're slightly different, and it won't be as malleable to press on. So it might take a little bit of persuasion to get on there. Go ahead and push these on. Like this one. Snap that one in place. Alright, so these are good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and just set this on here. That way it's pretty much out of the way. Next thing, I'm just gonna go ahead and place the ones with this. Since these are also still replacement plastics, it does have the two little indentations or dimples on this in one of the sides. You want to be very careful not to accidentally damage those when you're replacing them on here. And if you need to persuade it in there a little bit, you can use that same pry tool and there's that little gap in between. You put the pry tool in there and pry up on the side with the little dimples to kind of be able to slide it over. And on this side, you're going to take the pry tool, insert it here, pry on the side of the dimples, then do the back one, and have that one snap into place. Snaps right into place, just like that. Next we're going to do, take the 6 fork, same exact thing. Let's go ahead and pry off the old ones. Alright, there we go. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and get the input shaft lined up and installed onto the front cover. Just slide that in there. There we go, just like that. I'm actually gonna take this off. Move this out of the way. Next up, you have your bearings. Install this big circular bearing in there, and then you have this disc bearing that's going to go on top of there, just like that. And from here, we're going to take the keys and the other portion of the synchro, and we're going to put it on this synchro down here, and then we're going to try to get all this aligned, slid onto the shift rail. Move this out of the way, actually. Down right here. And the shift rail is going to be installed with it, so that way we can go ahead, get it all lined up, get this back in there, like so. So then once that's installed, that's going to get aligned onto that, and then we're going to try to install this all at once. It's going to be the tricky part. I'm actually probably going to get the cluster in there first, so that's going to be the one thing that's kind of like be in the way, and then go from there. So go ahead, grab your countershaft, cluster gears. I'm going to lift this up just a little bit for it to clear. Lower this down, mesh the gears together, and then you should be able to get it nicely settled in there. Make sure it rotates freely. So the next part's going to be the hardest part. Take the outer portion ring for the synchro. Get your keys. Go ahead and slide this over. And you're going to go ahead and push your keys in there. And there's 1, 2, and 3. So at this point, you want to be really careful. Try not to mess with that bottom synchro at this point. any slight movement, you might accidentally pop this off. So go ahead and grab your shift rail. Make sure your fork pads don't fall off. Carefully line it up, like so. Slide that onto here, like so. Just like that. And then from here, you want to grab this whole assembly, lift it up, carefully carry it over. Get yourself lined up. Shift rail in. And that's exactly what you don't want to happen. Then you're gonna have to go ahead and reset. So this is definitely gonna be the hardest part. So if you need someone to help you do this, definitely get an extra pair of hands because it's gonna be really tricky. Go ahead, get yourself positioned, grab your shift rail lever, go ahead, start turning this on. Get it lined up with the shift rail first. I'm gonna go ahead and get my leg in here to be able to hold it. Slowly lower it. We're gonna have to try to press down on it. So you can definitely do this one hand. So I'm using my leg to hold the case up. As I'm starting to slide this down, I pushed against this little detent ball here so I can get it on there. And I accidentally slid it back up. From there, go ahead and slide it down. Like so. And reach down, and the 5th, 6th reverse gear assemblies for the forks. We'll reach in underneath, lift it up so that way it clears the case. Then grab it here, pull it forward, make sure it clears. And then go ahead and set it right on down in there. Just like that. There you go. Looks nice and seated. Go ahead and try to spin these. Alright, so from here, I grab my bolts. So I did in fact forget which ones were where, but it should be pretty simple. I can always just look at the video again, but it looks like they're all pretty much the exact same bolt, so it shouldn't be too big of an issue putting them in there. Now I'm gonna go ahead, take these bolts. So the way these were oriented when I put them on is this was the bottom, or down here, this is the top. You have these bottom bolts over here. This one is gonna go in this bottom area over here. And this one is gonna go right here. So we're gonna have a bolt go in here and here. That's to hold it against the case. So I can lift this up off the table, lay it down flat, and get more of the bolts in so I can go ahead and put them in. Okay, so the memory card got full before I had a chance to show it. I tightened down those 2 bolts over here, and then once I had them tightened down, I grabbed it from the top of the case, and then from the bottom where the magnets are, and I lifted it up off the table, And as I start to set down, I set down the front first, and then slowly slid my hand out of the way from beneath the case, and I grabbed it from the end of the output shaft, and then slowly set it down on the table. So right now I'm going around, reinstalling all the bolts. But once I get them all in there, I'm getting them nice and snug. I'm not gonna worry about getting them torqued down, because I'm gonna have to remove all those bolts again to do the shimming procedure. So for now, this is gonna be perfectly fine, and it'll give me a chance to be able to make sure that this stays nice and flat against this when I go ahead and put it on my modified press to try to get fifth driven gear and then the other two synchros on to the end. So let's go ahead, get the rest of these bolts on, and go from there. All the bolts are nicely snug at the bottom now. So from here, go ahead, get it back upright. Get it lined up. There we go. Okay. Now, so from here, you take one of these new roll pins, reinstalled into here. Alright, finally got it on there. So I had to turn it a little bit this way to get it on all the way. Once you start fitting it on, because the old one, you kind of see, fit with focus, the tip is a little bit smushed together, and it's also shaved a little bit of the outer portion of it. So that's essentially what it does when you hammer it in. It is slightly bigger than the hole. So once you get it to the point where it's going to hit the shift rail itself, you want to push in on the right side, because it's going to be at a slight angle. Push in on the right side, and then it should start to go in all the way. You know it's going in all the way because you can use the old one as a reference. Put it up against the shift rail, and if this one, the new one, is further in than how far this one is, then you know it's gone on into the hole for the shift rail. Once you're there, you can take your little roll pin punch, line it up, and then start hammering it down into the hole and get it nice and flush. Next thing, we're probably going to put these bolts back in. And then these both are the exact same. So I'm going to also go ahead, go in there, clean all this off in here, and scrape off the edges here. And then put just a little bit of red Loctite on there before going in and feeding this back on. Alright, so first things first, you have this little spacer that has a little taper on it. So that's going to go like so on here on the countershaft, just like that. Once you have that one there, you can go ahead and install your 6th gear.
Alright, so I apologize. I had some footage that disappeared or went corrupt, but it didn't transfer over to the laptop, so I'm missing a good amount of footage that should be in the video. So I'll try my best using the photos that I have of the parts to try to explain. So in this photo, you have the 6th gear, and you have the synchro and the fork. Well, you don't see the blocker rings here, but just make sure you put the blocker ring in between the gear and the synchronizer, the hub. So when you're installing this, install it with the blocker rings and the gear and the synchro all together as one. Make sure you put the bearings, the needle bearings, in between there. I gotta look again. I don't know if there's a washer in there or a spacer, and make sure to install that too. Install it all as one. Make sure that the tapered like washer is installed between 6th gear and the race bearing underneath it on the countershaft. And then make sure you line up the splines of the gear with the driven gear for 6th gear, and press down slowly on the synchronizer. So in my case, I just use the plastic PVC pipe and hammer it down. They actually hammer down really easily. If you're in a case where it doesn't hammer down easily and you have to use a press, Just do it slowly and make sure that the block rings engage between the synchro and the gear, and it doesn't get caught and potentially damage it. Once you do that, and you make sure that it's all aligned with the gear, press it down all the rest of the way, and then you're going to take the snap ring that's going to be right above the synchronizer. You're going to put that snap ring on, and it's going to keep the synchronizer locked in place. Then you're going to make sure you install the blocker ring's 5th gear, and then after this you will install the snap ring for the shift fork onto the shift rail, the 5/6 shift rail and reverse shift rail. In this footage you're going to see me install 5th driven gear. Once you install 5th driven gear, you can go ahead and install 5th gear itself. Make sure you install the needle bearings and any respective spacers, plastic spacers. And then same thing, make sure when you're going down you align the blocker rings properly to where they engage onto the synchro. And then that should be all the footage that I might have missed from there. I apologize for not having that footage. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but hopefully this explanation works well enough, and then maybe sometime in the future if I do this again, I'll definitely do a lot better job of recording it, being a lot more thorough about making sure I get good angles and explain everything as best as possible. Thank you guys.
We got it to where it looks like it's right on it. So I'm going to relieve the tension here, let them to be able to see, and make sure that the split washer fits in there nice and good. Close this up, and it looks like it'll fit. So I'm going to go ahead and test it. Take your split washer. In this case, you want to make sure, I guess it doesn't really matter which way it goes. It's tapered on both sides. Alright, so we got 5th driven gear on. The blockers are a little bit tricky trying to line them up with the slots on the synchronizer because the driven gear is already on. So the best way to do that is to keep the blockers loose to where it can pivot or it can still spin. So once you feed it on and you're at this point, turn it to the point where the top portion of the blocker engages onto the synchro, and then when you turn this as it's going down, it should line up with the rest of the slots, and then you'll be good to go. And you'll know because it'll be nice and flush. Goes here. Alright, so yeah, so next step we have this snap ring. So I put this, there's a little spacer right here. And then you're gonna take the snap ring, goes in there nice and stuck. So I'll go ahead, feed this on, grab my snap ring plier tool, reach in here and grab that. Oh, you can't see it, grab that. Spread it apart and feed it on just like that. Oop. There you go. I don't think you saw it, just like butter. So that's gonna hold that gear in place now so it doesn't come off. Alright, so next step from here, we're gonna be installing all the reverse gear stuff. So we have the synchro and the fork for reverse gear. So that's gonna go here and then attach to here. All right, so same thing with 5/6 synchro. You can easily just do it without the outer portion first. If I can pop this off, that's on there pretty good. Oh, that's right. So it has the sleeve on the back. So you want to make sure that sleeve stays nice and flush there. So I guess you could easily just do it like this without it, but I want to try to get it with the sleeve off so I can actually no, I think I made this so where I didn't have to. In most cases you should be able to, but because I flipped the keys but they're the old ones, the burn portion of this is holding it in place. I'm not really too worried about it because this doesn't move anyways. It's just to control this going up and down. So that should be fine. So I'm probably just gonna install it like this with the key still in it, and then we can go from there. We're gonna take reverse gear, shift fork, and the synchronizer. Feed down just like so. Make sure you have the plastic little spacer on the bottom. That's gonna be riding on the bottom of fifth driven gear, this portion right here. Feed it on to here. And then make sure it slides right over. Maybe a little persuasion will do it. Okay, yeah, just tap it on a little bit with the mallet. Should be good to go. So from here, I'm gonna try my best to do both at the same time. Grab this. Alright, so from here, I mean, there's no real way to look at it from the side. Actually, from here. Yeah, you can't really look at it from the side, but you'll kind of feel once it gets bottomed out. And then same thing with the shift fork. There'll be a little notch on the side for the snap ring. Once that's lined up, you should be able to go ahead and put the snap ring on, and then you're good to go from there. So just like that, snap ring's in place for reverse gear. Next, we got the blocker rings for reverse gear. So same thing with all the other ones. I'm gonna go ahead, take reverse gear, and you're gonna go ahead, take these, line them up on there. Reverse gear is gonna have these little needle bearings. And go ahead, go down. And there we go. Make sure it goes nice and snug. Alright, so I kind of skipped ahead a little bit, but pretty much what I ended up doing is I installed the reverse driven gear and the reverse gear itself. Installed this little spacer here and the snap ring. Same thing with over here, snap ring over here. So after that, you have this bearings here. So you have the spacer underneath and the one on top. Take that, feed it right on over, just like that. Boom, there you go. Then you're gonna have another one of these snap rings. I'm gonna put that on real quick. All right, so you got that snap ring on right there. Nice and snug. Next step, we're gonna have this little speedo ring here, which has that index right here for the ball. So you wanna make sure that you have that lined up with, where is it? Where this ball is right here. So put the ball in very carefully and then line that up. So point this, line this up. So point this down towards that ball and carefully just move it down little by little. Make sure the ball doesn't move. Just like that. Snaps right into place. And the very last thing, aside from getting tails and everything else back on, is this last snap ring. And then you're pretty much done with this whole part right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the snap ring. So from here, I'm gonna go ahead and get the tail housing. I'm gonna get the output shaft seal and get that new one installed on there. And then once that's good to go, I'm gonna get the gasket, install it on here, and then go ahead and install the output shaft case, and then put those bolts back in. And then those bolts are going to get torqued down to, I believe it's 35 foot-pounds. So torque those bolts down. Then I'm gonna go ahead, disassemble this, get it out of the way, and then get the transmission flat on the table again, and then remove the front cover bolts so I can go ahead and do the shimming procedure, and then we can go from there. Alright, so the output shaft seal has been installed. I used a metal hammer and a piece of wood, except I didn't have any shorter pieces of wood. This worked, it's fine. You could probably use just something smaller, but got it nice and flush with the edge of that surface. Now I'm gonna go ahead and install it on the case. Upchuck gasket, so make sure you have the correct orientation. So looking at this, you have the two little slots for your dowel pins. You have this one here, dowel pin here, dowel pin here. So it's gonna go right there. Slide it up, pull it through the dowel pin. Just slide it on all the way. Make sure it's nice and flat. Line up all the holes best as possible. And then you want to do the same thing again once you get the output shaft on. You want to make sure you thread on all, what is it, 8? Yeah, you want to thread on all 8 bolts before you tighten them down, so that way you don't accidentally thread through the gasket. Now, take your output shaft, go ahead and line it up. Once you have it on part of the way, take the cup for the shifter, feed it on to the shifter rail. So, like that. Line it all up. And you're going to take the roll pin, you can use a new one. I'm going to go ahead, take my bolts, make sure I keep the orientation. When I did it, the tab was here. So this is going to be facing that way. So the bolt with the identification tag is going to go here. As you're going in, make sure that the gasket isn't in the way. And just thread on a couple of turns and then go on to the next bolt. Each bolt, making sure that the gasket is clear and not going to get caught in between the bolt. Okay, so got the press moved out of the way. Transmission is now laying down flat on the table. I haven't torqued these down yet, but they're pretty much snug down for the most part. The only thing left after here is I gotta go ahead, put this pin back in and put the covers back on. So that cover there and the shifter here. But the biggest thing before doing all that, go ahead, do the shimming procedure on here. So let's go ahead and check to see how everything feels in there. So definitely see a good amount of play. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure the original ones and see how well those work. Install the gasket on the front cover, and then, so I'm not gonna use those, but I'm gonna use the measurements and then see how well that works and then go from there. All right, so I reinstalled the pin on the shifter cup on the back. So now I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall these bolts. So if I remember correctly, the shorter bolts were for shifter for the back. I'm gonna go ahead, take these and then install them on there. And then we can go ahead and also take that cover and install that back on there. But before I do that, and I gotta remember now, we have gasket for those. So I actually gotta take this off, remove all the gasket under here. Same thing with this cover, get all the gasket off, and then we can go from there. All right, so I had the shifter covers here, and I got the gaskets for it. This one fits fine, and then you have this little red rubber like seal that goes up, and then you see the little matches right there and there. But then the rear one doesn't match up very well. But you know what? It's close enough to where I might as well just try, you know? I mean, it's all the way near the back, so probably won't be that big of an issue. So, I mean, might as well just send it, you know? This one fits for sure. I have an extra one. Might as well just try it. So, you know what? Screw it. If I notice any leaking from the shifter, I'll definitely know where it's coming from. So, let's go ahead and get these installed. I see that the GoPro's memory got full, so I don't know how much I actually recorded. But I went ahead and went through, tested out all the gears, other than reverse. It was really tough to try to get in reverse, so I'll have to try that later when I can de-energize the solenoid, so that way I can actually engage reverse. But this gasket right here, tight fit, but it was enough to where it can actually go on. So we'll see how well that sealed. This one went on perfectly. So next step, I'm gonna go ahead and look up all the torque specs for the tail housing, the shifter rail cover here, and I know these are, I believe, said 20 foot-pounds, but I gotta go ahead and take these off, put some red Loctite on it, and then torque them back down 20 foot-pounds. And then I'm gonna go ahead and get a zip tie this here, so that way it isn't rattling around. I'm gonna real quick clean up my mess in here, get a little bit more organized, and then we can go from there. Okay, so yeah, double checked my torque specs. So it seems to be about 35 foot-pounds across the board. So the main cover to the case, and the tail housing to the case, and then the transmission to the bell housing, and bell housing to the engine block. So they're all about 35 pounds, so that should be really easy to do. And then the cover there, and for the shifter, those are 177 inch-pounds, which actually is kind of interesting. But I do have an inch-pound torque wrench, so it should be not too bad. First things first, we're gonna remove the shift rail detent bolt. That should still be pretty much hand tight. Be able to loosen this up, pull that off. Okay, set that to the side. Take a magnet, take the spring out, and then take the detent out. Set that off to the side. Alright, from here, we're going to go ahead and remove all of these bolts. We're going to remove the bolts. So we're going to be using these bolts right here. Alright, so we got these 4 bolts. I'll set these bolts over here because these are the ones that are going to be reinstalled. Alright, got all of the bolts off, so I should be able to easily just pry the front cover off nice and slowly. Just like that. Alright, so then on the front cover, I've already ended up removing the gasket off of the cover plate, and I've also removed the shims off of the races here, so I don't have to remove the countershaft to get in there. But if so, you just have to lift this up, remove the shims in there, which was the one here, but also remove these for gasket. Go ahead and install that now, like so. Pop that on, just like that. So we're going to remove the input shaft bearing race right here. Right up nice and slow, otherwise it gets caught really easily. Just like that. Set that off to the side real quick. Take a rag, clean off all the dirt and extra stuff that got caught in there. Alright, so I got these shims measured out to about 49 thousandths. So go ahead, set those shims down right in here. Grab your bearing race, slowly feed it onto here, nice and smooth, just like that. Make sure it's on all the way. Go ahead, line it up. Check to make sure that the shift rail engages, like so. Just like that. Install your 4 bolts. go ahead and go in there and torque it down to 30 foot-pounds actually. It turns freely. Very, very minimal movement. Alright. So turning it more and more times, actually it loosened it up a lot more. So first kind of tight, but now it definitely has a good amount of play. So I'm going to have to go ahead and add a thicker one in there. Once you finish doing the shimming procedure, it could take a really long time trying to go through it, going up little by little. I probably recommend for the main shaft going up by 5 thousandths each time. I was doing 2 thousandths each time, and it was just taking so long. But once you do that, back off by 2 thousandths from there, and then once you have very minimal play on the main shaft, you can start shimming the countershaft. And then just the same thing, once it gets stiff, back off from there, and then you should be good to go on the shimming. But you want to make sure you don't have a lot of play, which mine is a little bit firmer than like just a little bit of play. But if I really try, I can definitely still feel a little bit of play on it, and it still rotates nice and easily. So it should be good there. I also went ahead and installed the slave cylinder. And I have a stainless steel clutch line, which will make it a lot easier to feed through the engine bay than the OEM one, which is a solid shape. So I can go ahead now, get inside, reinstall the bell housing, and then feed it up and reinstall the transmission. Put the drive shaft back in, fill the drive shaft U-joints with some high temp grease, and then fill the transmission with some just general Recon 3 for the first 500 miles, see how it likes that. And then yeah, that's really about it. As far as with the transmission, that's all that's left on it was the shimming procedure. Everything else is good to go. So that's going to be the end of the transmission videos, and then after this it's just going to be most likely the review video on the swap, which has been a long time coming. So again, thank you guys for watching it. Hopefully it's been informational. It's definitely been a long process trying to do all of this and learn firsthand what I need to do. But knowing what I know now, I can probably do it again a lot quicker. But it was just initially like the first time doing them, and then figuring out what tools I was gonna need. And then there was also tools I needed to make, which I'll make a video on the tools you're gonna need. And then simple tools, you can go to Home Depot and then cut something up. So instead of buying like a $100 tool, you can buy something that costs $10, $15 and save yourself a little bit of cash and do the exact same job for cheaper. Because these specialty tools you usually only use once, so you might as well use something that you can buy for cheap and save yourself money in the long run, especially if you're not gonna be using it over and over again like a shop would. So with that being said, thank you guys again, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.